You know, we've been taught to see our difficult childhoods as damage, as something that broke us, as wounds that need endless healing. We spend years in therapy, decades, trying to fix what we think is wrong with us, attempting to become the person we would have been if only our childhood had been different. But what if I told you something rather peculiar? What if those very experiences you've been trying to recover from were not accidents at all? What if they were not punishments, or mistakes, or evidence of a cruel universe, but something else entirely? What if your childhood trauma was actually an initiation, a kind of spiritual boot camp that prepared you for a life most people cannot even imagine? Now, I'm not suggesting we romanticize suffering. I'm not saying abuse is acceptable, or that neglect is somehow good for children. That would be absurd. But I am saying that what happened to you, however painful, however unfair, created something in you that the comfortable, the protected, the carefully nurtured children never developed. It cracked you open, and through those cracks, something got in, or perhaps something got out. Something that was always there, but needed the breaking to emerge. Most people walk through life asleep. They follow the script they were given. They believe what they're told to believe. They want what they're told to want. They never question the game, because the game has been kind to them. But you couldn't do that. Your childhood made it impossible. Pain, the confusion, the early confrontation with the darkness of human nature. It woke you up before you were supposed to wake up. And now you're walking through a world of sleepers, wondering why everything feels so strange, so hollow, so utterly unconvincing. Let me tell you about 6 signs that what you experienced was not just trauma, but initiation into a deeper way of seeing, a more authentic way of being. The first sign is that you developed an unusual capacity to see through pretense. While other children were learning to trust the surface of things, you were learning that surfaces lie. You had to. Your survival depended on reading what was underneath the words, sensing the mood behind the smile, knowing when the calm was about to shatter into storm. This made you what some might call hypervigilant, but it also made you perceptive in ways that protected children never become. You can walk into a room and feel the tension no one is acknowledging. You can hear the lie in someone's voice, even when their words sound perfectly reasonable. You can sense when someone is performing versus when they're being real. And this is not paranoia, this is clarity. You see what's actually there rather than what people want you to see. I once knew a woman who grew up in a home where violence could erupt without warning. She learned to read her father's footsteps, to know from the sound whether he was angry or calm, drunk or sober. By the time she was 7, she could predict his moods with uncanny accuracy. As an adult, she thought this was damage, a sign of how broken she was. But then she began to notice something. She was never fooled by people. When others were taken in by charm, by smooth talk, by impressive performances, she saw through it immediately. She could spot a liar, a manipulator, a fraud from across the room. What she thought was her wound was actually her gift. The second sign is that you cannot tolerate superficiality. Small talk feels like torture. Shallow relationships feel like starvation. You need depth or you need solitude. There's no middle ground. This is because your childhood forced you to go deep very early. While other children were playing games, you were grappling with questions that most adults never face. Why do people hurt each other? Why is the world unfair? Why doesn't love protect you? These are not children's questions, but you had to ask them anyway. And once you've touched that depth, once you've been to the bottom of the well, you cannot pretend to be satisfied with puddles. You cannot engage in conversations about nothing when you know what nothing actually feels like. You cannot waste your precious time on relationships that never go beneath the surface, because you've seen what lives in the depths, both the terror and the treasure. This makes you difficult at parties. It makes you seem intense, too serious, unable to just relax and have fun. But what they call your intensity is actually your refusal to betray what you know. You know that life is short, that suffering is real, that most of what people busy themselves with is distraction from the only questions that matter. And you cannot unknow this. You cannot go back to caring about things that don't matter just to fit in. The third sign is that you have an almost compulsive need for truth. You cannot lie easily. You cannot maintain false appearances. You cannot play the social games that require everyone to pretend. This is because your childhood taught you what happens when truth is buried, when reality is denied, when everyone agrees to ignore what's actually happening. You learned that lies, even comfortable ones, even well-intentioned ones, create the conditions for suffering. And so you became allergic to dishonesty. Not just the obvious lies, but the subtle ones. The performance of happiness when you're miserable. The pretense of agreement when you disagree. The social niceties that require you to say things you don't mean. Your system rejects these things like a body rejecting poison. I remember a man who grew up in a family where everyone pretended everything was fine. His mother's drinking was never mentioned. His father's affairs were never acknowledged. The children learned to smile and say, "We're a happy family," while the house was falling apart around them. As an adult, he found he simply could not participate in any situation that required collective denial. If something was wrong, he had to name it. If people were pretending, he had to point it out. This made him unpopular. People called him negative, a troublemaker, someone who couldn't just let things be. But he wasn't trying to cause problems. He was simply incapable of participating in the lie. His childhood had taught him that denial doesn't protect you, it destroys you. The fourth sign is that you feel a strange sense of not belonging anywhere. You don't quite fit with your family of origin. You don't quite fit with the mainstream. You don't quite fit with any group or tribe or category. You're always slightly outside, slightly apart, watching rather than fully participating. This is not social anxiety. This is the mark of the initiated. You see, initiation always involves separation. In traditional cultures, the child who was to become the shaman, the healer, the seer, was often taken away from the tribe. They went through experiences that set them apart, that changed them in ways that made them different from everyone else. And when they returned, they were no longer fully part of the ordinary world. They lived on the threshold, one foot in the everyday and one foot in something else. Your childhood trauma did this to you. It separated you. It took you to places most people never go. And when you came back, you were different. You'd seen things, felt things, understood things that your peers had no reference for. And so you became a kind of exile, not by choice, but by experience. This doesn't mean you're better than others. It means you're different. You speak a language most people don't understand. You see a world most people don't see. And this creates a loneliness that's hard to describe, because it's not about being physically alone. It's about being awake in a sleeping world. The fifth sign is that you need solitude the way others need company. Not because you hate people, but because you learned early that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. Your childhood taught you that others will fail you, that promises will be broken, that the people who should protect you might be the very ones who harm you. And so you developed a capacity to be alone without being lonely, to find peace in your own company, to need no one's validation to know you're real. This makes you seem distant to others, cold even. They don't understand why you turn down invitations, why you prefer an evening alone to a crowded gathering, why you can go days without speaking to anyone and feel perfectly content. They think something is wrong with you. They worry that you're depressed, isolated, missing out on life. But you're not missing anything. You're protecting something. Because you learned that people are unpredictable, that they can turn on you without warning, that the safest place is often the place where you're alone with yourself. In solitude, you cannot be betrayed. You cannot be abandoned. In solitude, you are finally safe. Your solitude is not emptiness, it's fullness. You learn to be your own companion, your own comfort, your own home. And this makes you free in a way that people who need constant connection can never be. You don't stay in bad relationships because you fear being alone. You don't compromise yourself to maintain belonging. You know that the worst loneliness is not being by yourself, but being with others and still feeling unseen. This is what your childhood gave you: the ability to stand alone without falling apart. And in a world where most people will do anything, sacrifice anything, betray even themselves to avoid solitude, your comfort with aloneness is a kind of freedom they will never understand. The sixth sign is that you have a deep, unshakable knowing that there's more to reality than what appears on the surface. You've always sensed it, even as a child. A feeling that the ordinary world is not the whole story, that beneath the visible, there's something vast, something mysterious, something that most people never touch. Your trauma cracked open the door to that mystery. When you're suffering as a child, when you're overwhelmed by experiences you cannot process or understand, something interesting happens. The ordinary self, the ego, the part of you that thinks it's in control, it breaks down. It has to. It's not equipped to handle what's happening. And in that breaking, in that moment when the small self shatters, you touch something larger. You might have experienced it as a sense of floating above your body, watching from a distance, or as a sudden feeling of peace in the middle of chaos, or as a knowing that somehow, despite everything, you would be okay. This was not imagination. This was not your mind playing tricks. This was you discovering that you are not just this small, vulnerable body. You are something more, something that cannot be damaged by what happens to the body or the mind. Most people never have this experience. They live their entire lives identified with the small self, never knowing there's something beyond it. But you know, you've been there. Your trauma forced you through the door that mystics spend lifetimes trying to find. So what do you do with all of this? How do you live with the understanding that your worst experiences were also your greatest teachers? First, you stop trying to fix yourself. You stop seeing your sensitivity, your intensity, your inability to play the normal games as problems that need solving. You recognize these as the marks of initiation, the signs that you've been somewhere most people haven't been. Second, you honor what you've learned. The depth, the perception, the capacity to sit with difficulty. These are not wounds, these are skills. These are gifts that came at a terrible price, yes, but gifts nonetheless. Third, you find others who have been initiated because they exist. Other people who were cracked open early, who see through the pretense, who cannot go back to sleep no matter how comfortable the bed. When you find these people, you'll know there's a recognition, a sense of finally being understood without having to explain. Fourth, you stop apologizing for being different. You stop trying to fit into a world that was never designed for people like you. You accept that you're meant to live on the edges, in the spaces between, as a bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary. And fifth, you use what you've learned, not to feel superior, not to judge those who haven't suffered as you have, but to help in the ways only you can help. to sit with people in their darkness, because you know that darkness, to speak truth when everyone else is pretending, to point toward the door you were forced through, so others can choose to walk through it consciously. Your childhood trauma was not fair. It was not deserved. It should not have happened. But it did happen, and you cannot undo it. You cannot go back and have the childhood you should have had, the protection you deserved, the love that was your birthright. That door is closed. But another door opened, a door most people never even see, and you were pushed through it, not gently, not with preparation, but violently. Too early, too young. And on the other side of that door, you learned things, you saw things, you became things that the protected, the comfortable, the carefully nurtured will never understand. So stop trying to be like them. Stop wishing you could see the world through their innocent eyes. Stop apologizing for the depth, the intensity, the refusal to pretend that everything is fine when it's not. You are not broken. You are awake, and there is a difference. Your sensitivity is not weakness. Your need for truth is not a problem. Your solitude is not loneliness. Your inability to trust easily is not a flaw. These are not scars you need to heal from. These are the marks of someone who has been somewhere, learned something, survived something that would have destroyed others. The comfortable will look at you and see damage. Let them. They had easy childhoods and easy lives. You had fire. And fire does not damage. Fire transforms. It burns away what is false and leaves only what is real. Think of a tree that grows in the forest, protected from wind, sheltered from storm. It grows tall, yes, but its wood is soft. Its roots are shallow. The first real wind that comes along will knock it down. But the tree that grows on the mountainside, battered by wind from the day it sprouted, twisted by storms, scarred by lightning, that tree develops different wood. Dense wood, strong wood. Its roots go deep into the rock. It bends in the wind, but does not break. You are that tree. Your childhood was the mountain, the wind, the storm. And what it created in you is not damage. It is strength of a kind that the sheltered will never possess. Roots that go down to places they will never reach. Wood that will not snap when life bends you. So stand in your strength. Live from your depth. Trust what you know. And stop waiting for permission from people who never had to earn what you earned, who never had to learn what you learned, who never had to become what you became. Your initiation is complete. Now live like it.